Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
What if you could take your leadership to the next level, starting today? Whether you're looking for the next big idea or just a spark of inspiration, the Paper Napkin Wisdom newsletter is for you. Either way, you'll want to visit papernapkinwisdom.com and sign up now.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 214. And today, you're about to discover something that could shift your perspective entirely. In this episode, we're having a powerful conversation with Chris Robbins. He's the founder of Soul Degree and an advocate for living with purpose through adventure, nature, and reflection. As you listen, you might find yourself realizing how a simple pause can open the door to clarity and to breakthroughs. Chris is a master of helping people reconnect with their inner wisdom. Imagine what could happen if you allowed yourself to pause long enough to hear the answers you've been searching for. His work at Soul Degree focuses on guiding people through intentional pauses in nature, a setting where transformation naturally unfolds. Before we dive in, think about it. When was the last time you paused to reflect on your path? What if that pause could provide a breakthrough you needed? I invite you to fully engage with this episode, and as you listen, let the ideas spark your own reflections. Share your thoughts with us on social media using Paper Napkin Wisdom, and write down your biggest takeaway on a paper napkin. Now let's dive in to this amazing conversation with Chris Robbins. Christopher Robbins, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Govind. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're both sort of Northeasterners here, dealing with a little bit of winter and a little bit of snow. So we talked about that in the green room. Hopefully winter is treating you well so far.
Other than being brown at the moment, it's treating me fine, but hopefully it'll be white in no time.
Yeah, hopefully in 7 days or less, right? We're getting this just before the holiday season, so it's nice to have a white holiday, white Christmas.
Well, we had a white Thanksgiving, which was pretty unusual. So we'll see what happens in a few days.
Absolutely. There's a lot I want to jump into, but I want to start off with the paper napkin. You shared a really interesting napkin with me, and I'll read it with you. The most interested are the most interesting. Why did you share that with me?
This was a bit of wisdom that was, I'm not sure I could use the word shared with me by my father. It was more him wagging his finger at me a little bit. But when I guess we would have been 14, we were living stateside, just outside of New York, and skiing was my passion. We would drive up and back from New York to Vermont, and it was always tradition to be having Christmas in Vermont, and that was always the kickoff to my ski season. And one winter, we're sitting there at the Christmas Eve table, and my dad proceeds to announce that we're moving to London. And because of his work, we would be leaving in several months, and stated. And as a 14-year-old, this just sounded like a horrible idea. And of course, taking me away from the thing that I loved most, which was skiing. And he said, in order to just give you, not that I had a vote in the whole thing, he he said, we're going to go over there. I'm going to show you the school, and we're going to have a little quick pass through the Alps. We're going to go ski in France or Switzerland. And so I thought, all right, let's I could be game for that. So off we went a couple months later, and it turned out that we ended up in Courmayeur in Italy, in this tiny little village, where my dad actually had a business dinner that I was asked to attend, because there I was with my mom and my dad. And I sat through this dinner just being a grumpy little shit, like a little 14-year-old snot that was just didn't, like I didn't want to be at this dinner. I was wearing like this, they put me in this button-down shirt with a wool sweater just to kind of, somewhat blend into the suited businessmen that were around this table. And um, there was one gentleman, this Frenchman who worked for my dad, who was just peppered me with questions all night long. And but otherwise, I was just a grumpy little tyke that clearly my dad noticed. And the next morning, he asked me. He said, how was the dinner? And I said, it was kind of boring. And he said, well, was there anything that you enjoyed about it? And I just sort of casually mentioned this guy who had taken interest in me. And it was clearly intentional of my dad to use that as a springboard to have this conversation about the power of being interested.
Mm.
And I said it myself. I said, the most interesting guy around the table was this guy who was asking me questions. Of course, I wasn't putting two and two together. But my dad did that for me and made it very clear that um, more often than not, the person you meet, particularly in a social setting, uh, the one you find most interesting is almost always the guy who is most interested. And I was desperately seeking love and attention from my father, who was, he had a big job and he was sort of emotionally and physically absent most of my childhood. And of course, I didn't know this at the time, but all I really wanted was his love and affection. And so from that point forward, I really took it upon myself to try to prove to my dad that I could be somebody who was interested. And, for a number of years, I think I wouldn't say I did it in spite, but I did it because there was an ulterior motive there. And I just absolutely am so grateful for that wisdom that he gave me, because over time, I think really it just, I, I lost um, the ulterior motive and really just embraced the joy of taking interest in others. And I would say to this day, it has been the thing that fuels so much genuine curiosity that I have, not just for life, but for people and for people's stories and where they've been and what they've been up to or what they're feeling. And um, I I attribute my level of curiosity and the path that I've been down in my life to being open to that and recognizing that up until age 14, like many young kids, I didn't really give a shit about anyone. Like I was just so focused on myself and my own sniveling needs. Um, and it bit me when I was a little kid, just trying to be smart or be, the leader or trying to be something that I wasn't. And the, that little bit of wisdom has really rung true for me and really plays out. I mean, even in my adult life, it's like you meet somebody that doesn't ask you a single question about you, and there does tend to be a little bit less um, appeal to somebody like that.
And there's so much that you shared there. Um, and all of that is true. But isn't it really interesting? Well, first of all, I mean, 14 years old was for me the zenith of my intelligence relative to my father. So I relate to that, right? Like what I knew relative to my father was probably maximum at 14, 15, and then it just slowly declines after that. It's everybody, I realized that, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. So it's interesting that you had that revelation, but it's also really interesting that you sort of had to be taken out of your environment to have that learning, right? I mean, you're not just in London, your new home. It's like you're leaving this place behind, going this incredible distance as a 14-year-old. I mean, it's like far away from all your friends,
Yeah.
all the things you love, right? Being cut off from it. And I can just imagine, sitting there in this environment that should be interesting, but I was like, I'm not there. And one person changed that experience, and your father reinforced that lesson. How important do you think it was for you to be shaken out of your environment to absorb that lesson? Because you got that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that it's a good point. I think that I was, we all kind of find ourselves at stages throughout our lives in bubbles that we're living in. And there's no question that, my bubble was New England or, from outside of New York City up the corridor into southwestern Vermont, and that was basically the extent of it, including any probably sports that I was playing and stuff. We weren't going very far. I think I had been to California maybe once, but yeah, not a lot of even domestic travel. So this idea that we were going to go across the pond and spend the next 4 years. It was talk about shaking up the snow globe. It definitely did that for sure. And certainly even that experience of being in that tiny little Italian town in this little village in this restaurant with these everybody was speaking, 10 different languages around the table. It all felt very adult and highbrow comparatively for me. And I was the youngest at the table by whatever 30 or 40 years. And so you're right. Maybe what you're saying is I am justified in feeling a little bit out of sorts or uncomfortable as I did at the table and having my mouth be more shut than open. Um, but of course, looking back on it, I wouldn't change anything about that experience and being able to go and spend 4 years of my teenage life in Europe. It widened my perspective in a major league way.
Yeah, and isn't it great that you got that lesson prior to embarking on that journey
Yeah.
too, right? Like you got the most interested or the most interesting prior to embarking on the journey of being in London. So it gave you an opportunity to connect. One of the things that I wonder about, and this is thing that we do in our business, which is we say connection before content. Before we get into a meeting, we find a way to connect as humans.
Mm.
Is that part of? We had a wonderful pre-podcast conversation. Is that just how you roll now? Is that something that's really important to you in every conversation you have?
I think it is. I don't think about it, but yeah, I'm always desperate to know who's who's across from me or standing in front of me. I thanks to maybe this little bit of wisdom, it is a part of who I am,
Yeah.
without a doubt. It's not let me take interest because that'll make the other person feel good. It's really a deep, genuine curiosity, and that curiosity, I feel blessed to have. Um, I don't know. The word curiosity is, um, maybe sounds a little trite, but the you know I used to fault myself for having worked through so many different industries and companies and positions and roles. I must have, by the time I got out of the corporate world, I had exposure to a dozen different fields of study or business, and then got into being an entrepreneur and exposed myself to another several. And for so many years, I faulted myself for. I guess my story was that I didn't have perseverance in one thing. That, and again, it was all a comparison to my father, who kind of went from like the mailroom to the CEO in the advertising business. Like many of our parents' generation, just did one thing and did it really well. And here I was, very quick to judge myself for having, jumped from management consulting and commodity trading and the hospitality business, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but I think some of that was probably nurtured by my own curiosity. And of course, looking back on it, it's given me so much exposure, and appreciation for all these different fields that people are in. I mean, I can talk about a lot of different business topics, thankfully, because of all the paths or the hats that I've worn.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's first of all incredible. I think it's interesting that you said the words you chose were I used to fault myself for moving through different roles. Isn't it interesting that many times, let's go back to your 14-year-old experience of being dragged across the pond and plopped in this dinner that you didn't want to be in. But a lot of these things that sometimes we judge negatively are the things that really create the challenge that builds our character, creates the challenge that makes us diverse and unique. And that becomes a unique experience that we can give as a gift to the people around us when we're being ourselves. And you use those words. It's not stuff that you do to get an outcome. These are just things that you've learned to lean into who you really are, right?
Mhm. 1,000%.
Yeah. So let's talk about also you mentioned that you at the time your as your father is ascending and in this in his career path and his journey, and that you are seeking the love and attention of your father. How have you learned from that in this, maybe combining this napkin in your journey as a father?
Oh man. Uh well, I think the biggest thing that shifted for me, in my own journey as a father, and what is so which which really took some time getting used to. I of course, I thought forever that my role as a father was to go bring home the bacon and check into the office and put on the suit and all this stuff that I observed as a kid. And after uh, 30 plus years of toiling in business, I was a broken man. I came out of the restaurant business after a decade and had lost millions of dollars of my own money and other people's money. And I was I was in a deep, dark place. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do next. And then my wife and I decided consciously, because we had been entrepreneurs and always just juggling, and you get this thing and I'll get the other, and just, everything from the money to the child rearing to you name it. And we made this conscious decision that she would focus 100% on her career and the money, and I would absolve myself of that, and I would support her with some of my business acumen from the back room, but that my primary duty would be to just be the first call parent and focus on the kids and the house. And that I met that with a lot of resistance because, of course, naturally I labeled that as being yet another sign of having failed in my career, because it also wasn't modeled for me. I mean, it's just not at
Yeah.
all what my dad was doing growing up. He was doing great things, but certainly not on the sideline of a soccer game or taking me to the doctor or whatever it was. And so here I found myself doing this, and it took something for me to move through that, both the challenge of social expectations, and just me navigating this path of what it looks like to be a full-time parent first and foremost. And of course, I is such a gift. I wouldn't change that for anything. I mean, it still makes me emotional in that the level of connection I have to my three children because of um, that intimacy that we shared. Uh, Greatest gift of all time, and I'm so lucky to not just have had that occur, and for Mel and I to decide, this was going to be a good call, but also to move through the resistance and then embrace it. After a couple, 2, 3 years, I really started to recognize the power in it, and the joy that I was getting from being present to my children, and not as a, hey, I'm going to do it different than my dad did it kind of thing. I just happened to find myself in that situation, and then could really just lean in to listening and being in the presence of my kids, without judging myself, but also recognizing that, hey, this is not what I grew up with, and isn't this sort of a special left turn in the road?
First of all, I could tell how emotional that experience was. Your body language changed, your voice changed. Um, Obviously, a powerful experience, and it really deeply resonates with me.
Mm,
Very often, I speak with one of my oldest friends um, about how the style of parent, the style of father. Let's talk about fatherhood for a second. The style of father I am is not the same as my dad. My dad was the international traveling, uh, photovoltaic pioneer around the world, doing amazing things, incredible entrepreneur, incredible, like, man, the stuff that he accomplished is unbelievable to me. And he did it as an immigrant. He came here in the country with nothing, and he did this amazing stuff. And you know the the price was he wasn't in the stands, he wasn't on the sidelines, he wasn't
Yeah.
around, and and I know that eats at him today. Like, I know that when he sees me around my kids, he's like, oh, he wishes he was there, and he's expressed that. But there is no template for the style of fatherhood that many of us in our generation are with our children. But it's doesn't mean that we can't lean into each other's experiences and learn from each other along the way. What changed in your family when you were able to do that, when you were able to be more present, be on the sidelines, be with the kids as they were growing up? What changed for them?
Um, I I experience my kids as being way more solid in their shoes and self-actualized today than I was at their age. And so I think I'm sure there's many things, but I think one of the things that um, might be different, and I say this based on my own experience, is that they were able to experience some of their childhood just being kids and not feel like that something like the love and attention of their parents was missing.
Mhm.
And
More
that they
conditional, right?
yeah, then they didn't need to go chase that, so to speak, consciously or subconsciously. And that I think that gave them a degree of flexibility and freedom to discover themselves in a maybe faster or more profound way
Mhm.
than if, and again, this is has a lot to do with sort of my own comparison of myself because I was at that age, I think, without knowing it, uh, trying to figure out what I could do to have my dad take notice.
Mhm. Yeah, right.
It's like part of the reason that had me jump through multiple, careers and jobs and companies and stuff, because I think I really did believe that, oh man, if I kill it in this next thing, or that he's really going to be impressed then. I'll get the attaboy that I didn't get when I was 8 years old. I mean, it sounds so bizarre, but uh, I don't think my kids had that. I think my kids they were able to get what they needed from me, and they were also really able to, instead of missing their mom, who was definitely on the road, much like my dad was on the road, but they were able to draw inspiration from what she was up to and appreciate the moments they had with her, and not be like, oh shit, where's my mom?
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And it's I think it's really powerful from a lot of different perspectives that that you talk about the comfort just to be. And one of the things I think is really interesting about it too is you talk about you said it a few times, right? I got to be myself instead of doing this thing to get some attention or do this thing to get this outcome. I'm gonna switch careers to do something bigger and do something bigger. But when you just sat in yourself to be yourself, right? To bring all of yourself to your family, bring all of yourself to the work that you did do around your family, it kind of changed things for not just for you, but for everyone, right? Like it opened the door for so much more, didn't it? You weren't chasing something, you were being something.
Yeah. Yeah, just being. Um, it really I I will say that over the years I I slowly started to develop an appreciation for all the experiences that I had, particularly my professional ones. And I also started to get some clarity around, after my dad died. My dad's been not been around for 18 or so years, and it probably took a decade after his transition for me to start to see the forest through the trees a little bit on this one and recognize the the headbanging that I think I was doing without even knowing it. And just this attempt to be whatever it was, successful or wealthy or, suited up or whatever I was witnessing as a kid. And but I then had this very powerful psychedelic experience, actually, where my wife and I spent some time doing some psychedelic assisted therapy work. And it was in the middle of this journey that I had this visual of myself sitting in a chair and just person after person, both people that I knew and people even that I didn't know from all walks of life, continued to show up right in front of me and sit in this chair, knee to knee, for a period of time where we just looked in each other's eyes. I would take in some of the features of their, face and eyes, and then a new person would come, and then it was kind of like I don't know, like you almost, if you're going through a slideshow, and it just person after person just sitting, and all we were doing was just being with one another. And there were no words. There was just the experience of having them in my company and vice versa. And literally, like, I came out of that, and at least my takeaway from that experience was that, yeah, I really am here not to be somebody else or be successful or any of these things, but I am here to just be.
Yeah.
Um, it was for me. I'm sure on this particular talk that we're having, it's maybe, well, you had to be there kind of moment. But for me, it was a real crystallizing moment,
No, I
and
think it's profound. I think what you're
helping
sharing.
me sort of recognize, like, hey, you know what? Maybe it is my place on earth, or my purpose, if you will, is just to be.
But I think it's profound, and I think it's it when we live an aligned life with who we really are, if we can strip away all the dancing on strings that we do to please so and so and to please this person and to fit this role and to do this thing to get the status to be able to one day, that's the story of the billionaire who goes to a fishing village in Mexico, stands out on the shore and sees this guy hauling in a haul of fish, this, and then he goes back to his hut and he runs out and runs and says, "What are you doing to get all these fish?" Fisherman says, "Oh, well, I've got this way that I do it, and it's fine. He says, oh, I'm a big businessman. I can take this idea and popularize it. Story goes in the predictable direction, and he says, well, why would I do all this? Why would I move to New York? Why would I do all this stuff and promote this for several years? Oh, so that you can sit on the beach and fish all day long. I do that now, right? So it's the when we are ourselves and when we are in powerful alignment with that, don't we just invite through coherence everything else that we need all the time? But we have to let go. We have to let go of these desperate seeking of this or that, or this approval or that approval, right? Isn't that true?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's really been the power of this experience. I can physically see the power of that experience that you had in that therapy session to be able to reinforce that. It is the power of being that allowed you to connect with all of these people, just your presence.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Chris, this was a powerful conversation. There's a lot here. I want to thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I love what you're up to. I just this simplicity of it all, and the power of revealing it or getting it out there, so to speak. So I admire that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to episode 214 of Paper Napkin Wisdom. And as we bring this conversation to a close, I want to express my gratitude to Chris Robbins for sharing such profound wisdom with us today. You may already feel inspired, perhaps even more aware of how intentional pauses, adventure, and authenticity can unlock doors you didn't realize were closed. Imagine what's possible when you embrace these ideas. What could happen if you allowed yourself the space to reflect and realign with your inner wisdom? Think of how nature-based challenges can shift your perspective and reveal your hidden strengths. What if being vulnerable and honest could make you more trusted and effective as a leader? And consider the growth that emerges when you connect with a group of supportive, like-minded people. Success isn't measured by external accomplishments, it's about living a life aligned with your purpose. As you reflect on today's conversation, you might notice a growing curiosity. Where in your life can you create space for meaningful pause? What if this pause could be the key to your next breakthrough? If today's discussion sparked something within you, take a moment to subscribe or follow Paper Napkin Wisdom on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Sharing your experience helps others discover these life-changing conversations. Now, I invite you to grab a paper napkin and write down your biggest takeaway. What idea or insight resonated with you the most? Imagine sharing it and inspiring others. Post it on social media using the hashtag #PaperNapkinWisdom and tag us. We'd love to see what you discovered. Until next time, keep taking small ideas and turn them into big results. Your next stop on your journey could be waiting with the quiet of your next pause. Make it a great day.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities, so do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn ads.com today.